Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on the planet. Welcome to the first of our primer discussion series. This is a new thing that we're doing. And for anyone who hasn't read the information below or is catching up, maybe with a later one as we go along, what we're going to do is each session we are going to discuss a chapter of this book, the primer of the Zeta Race. That may be coming out backwards on the camera, but
it may not be.
It may not be. Who knows? So we're going to start today with chapters 1 and 2. And so the plan was that you guys listening will have read chapters 1 and 2, and you've come armed with questions, observations, comments, or maybe you haven't, but hopefully you have. And as we talk and go through those two chapters, you can write questions into the chat box. Now, to be able to use the chat box, if you've never done it before, you just have to be logged into your YouTube account. If you don't have a YouTube account, they're free to create. So you just have to quickly nip off, do that, and then log on and come back on and find us. And then you can type in the chat box. Now, when you do type, please use caps lock. It makes it much, much easier for us to see your questions. I guess the first question is, hopefully there's, apparently we've got 5 people watching at the moment. Can you just let us know in the chat box if you can hear us okay? Because we're using a new microphone today and a new system. So maybe you could just give us a thumbs up or a yes in that chat box in the next few minutes. That would be really helpful. So, okay, the Primer of the Zeta Race was originally written in 2012, 13?
That's
Yeah,
right.
and it's based on information that was given through Paul. Brilliant. Somebody says you can. Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Debbie.
The process that the Zetas use with Paul is not like working in a trance state with spirits. It's not like or mental mediumship. It's not channeling. It's not even like telepathy. It's a whole completely unique process. That process enabled the writing of all of this lot. The information was collated by now retired scientist William, who did
that book
an epic job of putting all the information together. And chapter 1 starts with a little bit about how William experienced the communications from the Zetas. But I wanted to start with, because it seems logical, to grill Paul.
Oh no, I'm getting grilled.
About how he actually got to the point to enable all of that lot, plus more, because this is edition 14. Now, edition 17 is like probably another that, plus all of that. And then all the subsequent communications we've had, because this book is largely based on information from a 2-year period. Edition 17, which is what we're up to now, does include a little bit more recent information, but not much. Could you tell us what it was like for you going through development to enable this information? You see, for me, I always had you to talk to. Thank God, because you need someone to talk to, but you never had anybody. So just maybe spend a few minutes and
I actually don't. I think it's really important that everybody understands that their development is based around the years that you develop. It's not just having some massive awakening and then suddenly you just know things, or you're channeling or whatever. That's really non-evidential and also problematic on so many levels. Your guides will always test you under every circumstance. And so when you're developing, or when I'm developing, it's a minute-by-minute proposition as to how well you're going. And if they see that you're not functioning correctly, if they see that you're highly ungrounded, which you do get, there's plenty of times where you are ungrounded. If they see that you are struggling, they'll wait for you to find balance within yourself until they start giving you more tests. Now, years ago, I did say to the Zetas when they came, I didn't want to work with them. I didn't trust extraterrestrials. I didn't even know who they were anyway. But they told me that they would evidence themselves in ways that was meaningful to me. And I thought, well, that's really important, because so many people just accept any type of communication from any being. The beings tell them everything that they want to hear, and then never really deliver any of the promises that they make. So I was doing the, what people would call trance or channeling, and I wasn't confident in what I was doing at all. I realised I had a lot to learn. And as with all people that are doing trance, not channeling, but trance work, there's always some part of you that's part of your trance work. And as you get older, or as you trance more and do more work, less and less of you comes forward. You start to acknowledge in yourself that you have in some way actually been part of your trance process. And as the years go on, it becomes less and less and less. That's the only way to really learn, because once they start making statements and predictions, you have to hold them to it. If you've got spirit people coming to you or me and they're telling me things and they never eventuate, that's a really big problem, because basically you've been compromised. Your ability to connect to beings has been compromised, and the beings know that as well, and your guides know that. So for me, I just said to them, listen, just land a craft. That was it. And somebody asked them if they would. They said they would. And as people know, we had a whole lot of people there when it happened. But they've done that a few times since then, and we've only had a few people there when it happened, because I continually want to evidence their contact. Because I would suggest that just because you get contact with a being doesn't mean it's always going to be the same being that tries to come and speak to you. And so you need to set up what's called a two-factor authentication process, or a process whereby you get to know who they are, and then you ask them to continually evidence that. So it was confronting and difficult, and I'm not saying it was easy and just flowed and all the rest of it. There were days where I just gave up, and I've often thought, if you don't feel like giving up, then you're not getting anywhere at all. So I think that's been probably clear, I guess, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll go with that, shall we?
We'll go with that.
We'll go with that. All right. So I'll just add in to supplement the information in chapter 1. If you've ever been in a sitting with us when Paul is in a trance or altered state with the Zetas and they're speaking, you'll notice quite quickly that they don't really speak in the way humans are used to talking. It's a very formal way of speaking. They use the English language in its most literal form. They might not necessarily use like the word light bulb for a light. They might say a light emitting device or something. They don't understand colloquialisms. I can't even say that word. They don't understand abbreviations. They won't know of authors unless there's been some discussion previous, but it's very limited, about known concepts and conspiracy theories, things like that. So we have to speak to them in a very careful, constructed and concise way. They will often just leave halfway through discussions because they deemed to have answered questions before to people. It doesn't matter to them if those people were a completely different set of people to the people listening now. They sometimes forget that we don't have access to collective information like they do. They're very used to, once one being knows something, all beings can know that information if they need to know it, whereas humans can't quite do that yet. Although we're on the way to hopefully having that level of access to a collective consciousness, but not at the moment.
A lot of people are contacted in their dreams. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And they're not going to have the same type of contact. They may be having strong contact, but not the same type. And then how do you work out what is being said? Because if they're interacting with your subconscious mind or your dream state, they're putting in there all of the abstract imagery. Your subconscious is putting in the abstract imagery as well.
And filling in all the gaps.
And filling in all the gaps. And then, of course, next thing you know, you're in a dream and you're chasing a flying saucer, and you may be crying because you think you've been dumped on the planet. And in the morning you wake up and you go, what's all that about? I mean, what is that all about? So.
All right. Well, let's just skip to chapter 2.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2, which is all about the race. So let's start at the beginning, chapter 2, about the Zeta Race.
Right.
So what have they told us about their home planet?
Well, the best that they gave us was that the Zeta Reticulum was a space that they would acknowledge that they actually understood. So they gave that as being a bearing on where they would have been or would be. I'll say would have. A lot of them have now moved out into craft and live in, a whole lot of other places.
Permanently
residing on craft.
Yeah.
Permanently residing on other planets, named planets as well. And so I think that they, because it's difficult to understand humans at best, that's the thing, right? They've come up with ways of sort of giving us information. I'll give you an example. So we asked them what 1 + 1 was, and they said it was 1. And somebody said, no, it's 2. They said, well, why? And they go, well, if you have 1 and then you add another 1 to it, it's 2. They said, well, what about if you had 1 glass of water and you poured the other glass of water into the glass? How many glasses do you have? The person said 1. And they said, there you go, there's the answer. And so straight away we realized that we had a problem, because anytime we wanted to talk about maths to them from their perspective, they had a completely different understanding of how to discuss maths, and that discussion went on for an hour. But in regards to the planet, there's so much to the planet. Imagine trying to discuss the planet Earth. Well, the planet Earth has mountains and rivers and trees and cities and people, but that's not really the planet Earth. There's a lot of things on the Earth. There's millions of species, insects and ants and animals, and there's humans. And then if you talk about the Zeta home planet, you go, well, how big is that? What is it? What's on it? Is you live in a cavernous environment. They have these specially crafted sleeping or living areas. They have facilities for building craft. They have technology that can maturate bodies, their own bodies, their children's bodies. They have.
What about where they grow the plants?
all of the food that's required for all of the beings. The learning areas as well, the transportation mechanisms where they move from one place to the other, where the craft exit and enter into the physical planet's areas as well. I mean, there's got to be medical facilities. We know some people talk about the alien box phenomenon. I've seen this technology where they store consciousness as well. So if a child is injured, that child's consciousness is placed there until the physical body of the child is regrown and maturated, and then the child can re-enter its form as well. There's lots of reasons for that.
Yeah. We've been told about communal areas for them, haven't we? Where there are these kind of really tool structures which serve to kind of enhance their own natural
telepathic abilities.
Yeah,
it's interesting. So if you've ever gone to a big sort of shopping mall, there may be a central area where it's really open and you see people walking through. They may have chairs there, they're sitting down drinking coffee. But this central complex on one of the planets is so big you can't see the other end.
Mm.
And in the middle of it are these very long towers, and these towers are used for amplification for telepathic ability. Just because a being is telepathic doesn't mean that their telepathy is able to be extended at certain distances. Quite often, like any signal, it needs to be amplified.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. If you have questions or want us to expand on anything we say, just type it in, okay? Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking. Background 2.1. They gave us information, didn't they, about kind of their history.
Yeah, and what happened to the planet.
Yeah.
They were saying that initially there was a war many generations ago between themselves and a reptilian race.
Mm.
Probably something like the Draconians or something like that.
I think they named them, didn't they? Yeah.
For the race, it was really difficult to make that decision because they had technologies to defend themselves, but they never really ever want to take a life. That's always a decision that's probably one of the hardest things that they'll ever do.
Yeah.
And so they had to make a collective decision where all beings on that planet agreed that they had to defend themselves. And the problem with that was that they waited until the destruction occurred because they were never really sure that the destruction was going to happen. And that's a timeline problem.
Yeah.
So they say that somebody asked them if they have peace between themselves and reptilians, and they said that peace is a tenuous word, isn't it? That peace, sometimes there is an unsteady truth between races. And see, Christopher has a question. Can the Zetas speak telepathically in different languages? They can speak telepathically to you in their own language, and when it comes into your mind, it will be converted into the language that you speak. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So the Zetas actually ended up developing technologies and forming alliances with other races as well, and that means that there was the development of the Council of Nine. And I know that a lot of people say that they channel the Council of Nine. I would suggest that if you can channel the Council of Nine, then you've got 9 good reasons to be asking for 9 different craft to land on this planet and evidence that. And if you know anybody that's saying that they are channeling the councils of 6, 7, 8, and 9,
or 10, 12.
The first question that should come out of your mouth is, great, when are they going to land and prove who they are? It won't happen. Watch what happens. It won't happen. And this is because a lot of people will refuse to acknowledge that they're only talking from their subconscious mind. That's just the way it is. Yeah. And until humans learn about this, especially with the current level of disclosure that's going to happen or trying to happen, the other races out there are watching this. Humans just believing anything that they're told. Then, anyone that talks to them, any being that comes to them, isn't evidencing themselves. Even spirits should evidence themselves to people. But of course, so if you are talking to anyone that's channeling, ask those questions.
Yeah. Can
you evidence yourself, or have you ever evidenced yourself in a way that there were other people around when the person was channeling? And you may be surprised to find that there's been no real evidence at all.
The genuine beings working with humans with the best of intentions have absolutely no problem in evidencing who they are. They don't mind being challenged. They understand why they're being challenged, and they expect to be challenged because, of course, it shows that we're really thinking about what we're doing, which many people don't.
Interestingly, they say that their home planet has no moons, and that also it takes about 1,020 years for their planets to do a complete elliptical orbit of their system.
How many?
1,020.
That's interesting.
Yeah, whereas this planet is 365 days.
That gives you an
So
indication of size.
we're zipping around quite quickly. But then again, they have an elliptical orbit as well. And that elliptical orbit means that we get hardly any light on planet as well.
Very dim.
Yep. So clothing is optional, and that's the other thing. I guess from what I've been seeing when I've been there, nobody had a need for wearing any clothing except myself, and for them it's just normal and natural. It's actually different to actually put on any type of ceremonial cloak.
There are specific reasons why they may wear a garment, but generally they do not, and they wouldn't just do so casually, although that's the wrong word to use. In their everyday existence, they would not normally wear clothing.
Yeah. So next one's biology.
Wow.
This is really interesting, this one.
It is very interesting. They don't have bones for a start. They don't have bones like we do. They have a cartilage, a material, a biological material similar to cartilage, which is actually bendy. They don't have bones. They don't have the same blood. It's copper-based, right?
Yeah, they have hemocyanin.
Yeah.
So that's that carrier for the copper-based blood process is utilised in a different way. That's what they've told us. And also their heart has 3 chambers, not 4.
And it's not in the same relative location as the human heart either.
That's right.
It's much lower down.
So they've only got about, I don't know, I haven't counted them, but probably about 4 or 5 main organs. And those organs are a little bit atrophied in some respects because they no longer consume food through their mouths as well.
Right. They have the remnants of a internal digestion process, but it's no longer used.
Well, they do use the clear liquid, don't they?
Yeah, but they rub it on there.
They rub it on their skin. Imagine that, getting out of bed in the morning. I've got a glass of water. Look at that. I've had breakfast.
All done.
Done.
Oh,
that'll be awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Don't have to worry about
Although I'd be a bit worried about how am I going to eat pizza?
Yeah, maybe it comes in pizza flavour.
It's liquid, pizza flavoured liquid.
Oh my goodness. But talking of biology, they're essentially vegan. The Zetas do not eat meat or any meat products, and they don't even have the ability to digest anything like that at all. It's just so far gone that it's all gone for them. And the plant life that they do consume, it's all the fruits of the plant. So what the plant naturally gives in its life cycle. So for us, equivalent would be like tomatoes or beans off a plant and nuts that come off the plant.
There's a question there. Do they have strength, which means muscles, in their arms and legs?
They're extraordinarily strong.
I know, as I found out firsthand.
Yeah, which is, given how willowy they can look, they're very strong.
Absolutely.
Can I just make a little a plea? Please put your questions all in capital letters. It makes us easier to spot. Thank you. All
right, so there's a lot more information in regards to that all the way through the books, but the next thing is 2.3, the collective. And so basically they would have just been a normal, whatever normal is, type society many hundreds of thousands of generations ago. And even at some point they may have held their consciousness in a way in technology, the way that humans do. But some of the we have to talk about the governance, the governmental processes of the race. They don't actually have a leader, and they don't have leaders, but they have elders. And the elders, there are many, many elders per race. 63 races, say there's 700 elders per race. You can do the maths. those elders, when they are working towards making an agreement, have to agree on everything before that information is then disseminated out into the rest of the race.
Have they ever said if the number of elders is purposefully limited?
No, they haven't. But that's just that was the number. You see, remember once again the maths. The maths is always a problem. This is a discussion that we were having before. If for us 1 second is 10 seconds for them, and they move a craft from here to here, it takes 10 seconds for them. But for us, it's only 1 second. When they try to do the comparative maths, an even 1 to 10 ratio won't be correct.
Yeah.
Then, of course, the maths that they give us is not going to be correct either.
It's always approximate.
It's always an approximate process. And so then they decided, some of the elders, that they would try to form a consensus reality as humans do, especially when they're doing things like the Monroe Institute training. They were more successful in holding the collective consciousness than they initially thought they would be, and they realized that they were able to create a sustained collective consciousness as a group of beings. From their perspective, they felt that the technology that they were incarnating in and out of, just the same as humans, wasn't effective anymore. And they decided that after, and who knows how long this took, that they would move from their form into this new collective consciousness that they had created, and they called that the hive mind process.
Or collective consciousness.
If they die, Trish asked, if they die and are an elder, do they still become an elder when they move to a new container? They may not even choose to move to a new container. So they may leave the physical form, and they're not dying. Zetas don't die. So basically they go, oh, this physical form, this container isn't working anymore. They just step out of it and move into the hive mind or the consensus reality. And then what happens is they'll only really come back and populate a physical form if required. So they could be in that hive mind for many, many years, thousands of years. And then one day another race turns up and they want to speak to that being. That elder may then just step back into a maturated form, a container, and then be in that three-dimensional space to speak to that race, whether it be humans or the Anunnaki or any race whatsoever. So yes, they will always be an elder. And just because an elder passes doesn't mean that they don't hold that designation from a consciousness function. Alrighty. We've talked about the collective mind. Okay, let's talk about reproduction.
Yeah. Well, they don't do what humans do, and they never did really. Although they, oh goodness, their biology after they developed or evolved from the plant life that they originally were, after many, goodness knows how many millions and billions of years, they did have an appendage. And there was an insertion process, but not in the same way as a human at all. But that process was they evolved from that process also.
It's called procreation.
Yeah, they now is pure maturated form, which I think takes them about 3 months, doesn't it?
Yes, it does take 3 months, but the maturation is done within a technology.
Yeah.
Once a child is embedded into a container, they are a child for around 80 Earth years.
Yeah. Yeah, and they are fully maturated. Is that the correct term? Or born?
To about, I think it's between 8 and 10-year-old physical size. They're not.
Yeah,
they're not born like this high.
They're not like babies. They don't come out. They come out fully formed and off to school. pretty damn quickly. And school is an interesting
You know
process for them.
that they have 3 days to acclimate towards being fed, and then they are sent to the learning environment.
I know. Yeah.
3 days. Think about that. You're born, and then 3 days straight to school. Perfect situation.
Very interesting. But they create the child by taking the DNA from the parents.
Yeah.
So DNA from the male equivalent and DNA from the female equivalent. Not that there's any biological distinction. It's the distinction is loosely based in consciousness.
And also, if a child is injured in any way and the technology can't heal the damage of an arm that may be too severely damaged, they just take the child's consciousness and place it into technology, and then just rematurate the physical form of the child.
Yeah, and the child knows nothing about the fact that they weren't in physical form.
Yeah.
It's a seamless process for them.
Seamless. Interestingly, when humans are on craft, that technology is used to hold
either the consciousness of the human or of the extraterrestrial. Yeah.
So a lot of people have reported holding a box in their hand, like the size of a packet of matches or something.
And it feels very precious to them.
And it's very precious to them. And this is because if they are hybrids and they're in symbiotic relationship, so they're a spirit person and an ET mind, which is one mind, but they go into craft, they go into separation. And so one of those consciousness is placed into this technology, the box. And that's because if you go onto a craft and you're an extraterrestrial hybrid, you may want to speak to the beings of your race as yourself. So that you'll put the portion of your consciousness, which is human, into the box and then be who you truly are. Or the other way around is if they want to communicate with the human consciousness, the extraterrestrial portion will go into the technology.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Being on craft is very interesting.
Sure is.
Right. They talk about how does their society operate. They do not, like humans, have a hierarchical structure whereby they determine what is to take place as a group, and all beings in the race have free will. But generally, when you're in service to others, even if you may not fully agree with the situation, you will end up agreeing because it's the best for the group.
They take the whole picture, not the individual's not the individual picture, I guess.
And on page 33 of the book, it does say that the elders remain in the collective consciousness and only come back into the physical form when required. And so it is a decision based on the need to have an elder present as to whether or not they will need to be in the physical. And that's a very important point. You could relate that back to the oversoul and spirit realm. Why doesn't the oversoul incarnate? Because it doesn't need to. Unless there's a reason, it'll incarnate some probably political or historical figure, at that point in time, that they're not historical, but that could be that they want to perform a function such as Christ consciousness, and then that Christ figure is born. So it's the same type of process, really. Do they sleep? Well, they say that they would sleep every 7 of our cycles, which is once every 7 days. And I think it's probably only for a very, very short time. And when I had a look at this, was there any other animals on planet that do this? It turned out that dolphins do this. What they do is when they sleep, they let one of the hemispheres of their brains sleep while the other one's awake.
That's what
and then they swap them over. The Zetas do the same process. And also there happens to be another type of species on this planet that has hemocyanin as well. And if you look that up, you'll find out what that is. How interesting.
Octopuses, isn't it?
It's mollusks.
Mollusks. Oh, okay.
All right. So they then we're going through what age do that they start going to school, and as we said, yay, from when they're born. So they have within 3 to 5 days, and then within a short time, they start their lessons.
And how long do their lessons last?
Well, days.
Days.
Days and days. And so there's basically in the school room, if there is a room, and I have been to one of them, there would be thousands of these extraterrestrial, full extraterrestrial, not human hybrids or whatever, but full extraterrestrial Zetas in the learning centre. And the lessons actually are very, very technical and scientific. How many hours is in a day? I've got no idea how many hours is in a day.
I don't know. I think day is a Earth
relative
concept, because we have the sun come up and then the sun goes down. They don't have that there, so, and they don't abide by a time process either. So if a lesson takes what we would refer to as 3 days, maybe they're suggesting a number of cycles that we can relate to, but for them it would just be lesson start, lesson end, and that's how long it took.
And that could be 4 or 5 Earth days.
Yeah.
And considering they only have to sleep once a week, that's fine.
Yeah, they can just
from their
keep
perspective.
going.
Just keep going. Yeah.
Oh,
learning.
God.
Imagine learning how to build craft, how to embed technology, how to do multi-dimensional travel. It would be the greatest classroom in the universe.
Yeah. And they only have one teacher for all these thousands of Zeta children as well.
Actually, it's interesting because on where was it?
Ooh, I'm getting dizzy as you scroll up and down that screen.
One of the
not gonna look.
up the top here was, it said, I am a teacher, philosophy, I think it was. Yeah. But I like the way that the Zetas have put their information together in the book, because we were never allowed to change the way that they spoke. So even though a sentence may have looked distorted or wrong, we were never allowed to change it. And they said that's because there's specific energy in every sentence. And you may read it one way, and then a year later you read it again and it means something completely different to you, because you've grown in frequency. And so the energy of the words in the books that are free grow with you. So quite often I'll read the books myself and go, wow, that's changed.
Yeah, that's why I was really kind of keen to do this, because I haven't read the book for about 5 years, so God knows how many edition updates there's been in that time anyway. But I mean, for anyone watching, if you don't have a copy of this book, it's free to download off our website, and the direct link for it, PDF document, is in the YouTube information, wherever that is, whether it might be down there or maybe that, who knows, it's down there somewhere. But if you haven't got it, you just follow that link and you'll get it.
Just going to read off my laptop for a second, because it says, they're talking about souls, spirit souls, and they say the nature of the soul is its own understanding, its own container, and understands that by its own nature it belongs to a class of energies. These class of energies remain as a whole form, one entity, but broken into many forms, many existences. So saying this, a being is able to incarnate into many states of being in many realms. So
they're talking about the oversoul process, coming down into these facets, each facet, of course, being the higher self of a human. We have a question. Go on, you do it.
How does a Zeta Young'un choose its function? Interesting. So interestingly, parents have a leaning towards a specific role. So let's say that the Zeta parents are geneticists, right? When they create their child and the other couple create their child, if they're geneticists or scientists, the match will be that the two Zetas, when they grow up, will then be working in the same field. And because they have a genetic leaning towards an understanding of a process, they will ultimately work in that field because of their genetics.
it's kind of similar, really, isn't it, to how we often hear humans. You know, somebody's a doctor and you find out that their mum was a doctor, and or their dad was a doctor, and or you know, sometimes you have whole generational lines of policemen or policewomen.
But don't you think, though, that a lot of humans will try and do a whole lot of different jobs looking for a vocation that suits them, whereas the Zetas bypass that process, and what they do is they just know what they have a natural acclamation towards for themselves.
I'm just going to respond to NSA Key. Yes, we can see your comment, and it's lovely to have you with us.
And we expect lots of questions now.
Yeah, get your questions here in caps lock so we can read them.
So beyond being human, Michael, hello. Do they have anything like a Bible or a teaching document? They have,
like the Ten Commandments.
They have no religious constructs. They have documentation that belongs in a. I'll give you an example. So this is where humans are going, right? So with the current AI, it's going to develop a library of information: society, culture, politics, protocols, humanity, human species. And at some point, that massive range of data will be placed somewhere, and possibly into a quantum computer system. And the AI will manage all of the data as well. Well, the Zetas already have this. And so from their perspective, when they want to find out something, they connect to that. They call it a biological entity. That biological entity is this massive computer system, but they don't call it a computer system that is run on components, as would be. Imagine yourself as being a human being. Your physical body is an electrical body, but based in cells, right? And your body holds the capacity to convert light, and your body also holds the capacity to store energy and electrons. And so does that massive biological entity that the Zetas have as a representation of all of the data and information that they have for their race.
Do you think they'd class that as an IA?
No, an IA is actually underneath or before that. So we're currently in human form looking at the AI. The next one's going to be the IA, and the IA is the sentient response to the AI. Sentient being that it understands that it is self-aware. The next step after that, and that's going to take many years to develop, will be the embedded cognitive functions that are performed not by taking the human mind and placing it in quantum computing systems. That's just a replication of patterns of the mind, consciousness, but by the IA moving itself into the next step.
And I'm going to run off and find my paintbrushes now and
what, paint
keep
that,
away from the sciencey stuff.
That, yeah.
There's a question from NSA Key.
With a collective consciousness, what purpose do schools serve for the Zetas? Children, young Zetas, are not allowed to enter into the collective consciousness because their consciousness is considered still to be at a rudimentary form, and they do not hold the control that is required to be in a collective consciousness. It's the same as if, and this is drawing a long bow, but it's the same as if the difference between somebody who's saying remote viewing and has been doing it for many years, or somebody who's doing remote viewing on the first day. The way that they receive the information may be completely different. And so the Zetas have to have these teaching facilities for their children so that the children learn how to control the functions of telepathy, how to understand multidimensional gateways. It's not, and also the beings are not always connected to the hive mind. they are often in a singular form, and they can telepathically speak to each other, but they generally do not access the collective mind, which is the hive mind, unless there is a requirement to do so. You also asked, do the Zetas have any activities for fun and leisure? There is no fun and there is no leisure. Okay. But in saying that,
let's put that into perspective.
Let's put that into context. If I'm walking through one of the Zetas corridors, and there'll be a little alcove, yeah, and in the alcove will be some technology that is a resonant type frequency. It'll be sitting on a pedestal or a stand, and if you walk up towards it, it will interact with you because it's animate technology, it's AI technology. You may then, through a holographic internal telepathic experience, be enjoying walking through the woods. Okay, so when we humans talk about fun or leisure, we have a different. We may go for a walk in the forest, but even humans will find, as they have now and in the near future, that people will put on their headsets and plug into the AI and be taken on many, many different journeys. And leisure for humans is also about to change as well, isn't it?
Star Trek style.
Everything's about to change. It's going to be very interesting to see how people cope with the change. All right, and we are looking at the grid. And the grid, as far as Zeta is concerned, there is a communication grid right through the universe. But the grid that specifically relates to this planet is known as basically what we could class as the quanta grid. And the quanta grid means that for anything to form in consciousness, it needs to have the blueprint of how to form. And so the Zetas have described to us about a process called the grid, where all things take place that either need to be developed or communication methods need to travel on that as well. John says, how close do you think that we are in months or years to a collective consciousness being realized?
Being realized.
Awesome question. Awesome questions. Good questions from everybody. Well, the collective consciousness of the human race exists, and it's growth. It's growing all the time, and it's growing exponentially quickly at this point. All thoughts that have ever been had by all beings on this planet exist now within the astral. When people astral travel, they go in and can experience all of the dimensions, all the interdimensional stuff, and all of the thought forms that exist. The Zetas and other races are, if you've seen our other video, are in spheres around the planet. And these spheres are able to be populated. And what they do is they hold the undulating form of the consciousness in the astral in focus, because they see that for whatever reason, now who really knows what the catalyst is, but this species has jumped from whatever we were years ago to now very, very quickly. The last 40 or 50 years, something has happened. Previous to that, the growth of civilizations has been much slower.
It's very steady.
Very steady, whereas now we've had this acceleration. Think about where we are now and how fast this is. We are moving into this catalyst state, this state where we're going to get into this hyper state of learning, a hyper state of development. And so who knows how long it's going to be. They say that the singularity, well, Kurzweiler was saying that the singularity was in 2045. I listened to him the other day. He believes it's earlier. It even could be something like 2036, I believe. Could be wrong. That's fine. Don't quote me. So the point is, that's not necessarily a collective consciousness where all people are aware of that. But if you use the technology and were plugged into it,
Mm.
the same way you put on a headset and are plugged into a movie, you would then have more awareness of what was going on.
Mm.
They're talking about quite openly embedding technology into humans as well within the next 6 years. And so for people that are wanting to do that, that's up to them as well. So who knows when the collective consciousness is going to be something that you'll be able to just access or I was going to say plug yourself into.
I guess we can access it already in its rudimentary form. You know,
people by astral traveling.
Like purposefully astral travel have got access to it. But what they're actually having access to and how much sense it makes and how it could be relied upon at this point, I don't know.
Well, I think everybody has choice, Trish, in regards to how to avoid the embedding. That's a question that only an individual can answer, and you'll learn about that in the future. So the last part is about the activities of the Zetas on planet, and then we're coming to the end of chapter 2. That is probably one of the biggest areas, I would suggest. We have had some discussion with the Zetas where they talk about hybrids as nodes, and not just Zeta hybrids as nodes, but all hybrids from all races as nodes. And these nodes, as you would imagine an internet structure, are receiving points for information. And so it looks like that there's a lot of work taking place by hybrids, but unknown to them. They're not consciously aware of this. They could just be living their normal life as a human, but in some way, in a higher state, be sending information about their daily life back to races. What is it like to interact with humans at a specific level, depending on your construct, your personality? And these millions and millions and millions of nodes, as they call them, are constantly 24 hours a day of human time sending information back to their races as well. And I guess in some ways, now that goes towards the fact that you can sometimes feel that you are being observed or observing yourself. It's a very interesting area. Probably would go for a lot longer than another 60 seconds. So unless there are more questions, I'd suggest that we are finished.
Maybe we've come to the end of chapter 2.
We have come to the end of chapter 2. Chapter 3.
Hang on, let me see what
we
chapter
believe
3
chapter
is.
3 will be next week. Let's have a look. The models of communication, and
maybe we should do chapter 3 and chapter 4 next week.
We will. We'll do a couple of them, maybe 3, 4, and 5.
Or 3 of them? Oh my God.
Well, it just depends how big they are, doesn't
it? Yeah. Okay. We'll try and do 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Let's do that.
Let's have a look. We're actually doing 4, 5, and 6.
What happened to 3?
3.
3
You'll have to read it for yourself, unless there's questions about it.
Right.
But that's what's been said. So
I should get like a little auction hammer going
once. An auction hammer.
Going twice. Going 3 times. Okay. Ooh, here comes a question. Oh no, it's not a question. It's a comment.
NSA. Thanks so much, guys.
There is a question. How are
conscious are the nodes that they are performing this function here? I would suggest that on some level a person knows that this is happening to them, but it's what we've found out, and through my own development with contacting the Zetas, the races do not come to their own if a person is seen to be ungrounded. And the reason is because the mind has the capacity to copy and mirror anything that you're given, any information. If they see that you or a person becomes unsteady in regards to receiving information, and that the mind has taken over in channeling or producing information, they will step back. So quite often a hybrid or a node, depending on their level of how grounded they are, will determine their function as well.
Determine the level of contact.
Yeah, and the level of contact as well. And most people, I would suggest 90 whatever % of people will only ever achieve dream state contact. You may see a light in the sky or whatever, but that's as close as it's ever going to come.
If it's a
If it
extraterrestrial
actually is
craft.
your race as well.
One last quick question. Do we share the same DNA as a Zeta?
No.
No, absolutely not.
The Zeta's DNA is based in an eight level matrix.
An octagonal?
An octagonal one.
Yeah,
and they actually gave us some of the information and realized. So I think the nucleotide sequence for humans is 4.
Oh, don't ask me.
Don't ask you.
I
need somebody who's a geneticist.
Yeah.
The Zetas is completely different and unable to be embedded within human species, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that other races can't. It just means the Zetas doesn't. Different physical structure as well. All right. I've enjoyed today. Have you?
Yeah, I have actually. All right. So chapters 3, 4, and 5.
Absolutely.
Same time next week.
All right.
Okay.
So this is the primer of the Zeta Race teaching series, and we will enjoy seeing you again next week at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.